What's your biggest I fricked up moment? Not safe for work. I was a bank teller working drive-thru and I had a fat stack of cash in an envelope, roughly $3,000-ish, that I had set aside because I needed my manager to take it to the vault because I was over the max amount allowed to keep in the drawer at any time. I'm just going through the motions and some guy was doing a cash withdrawal, and while I was on autopilot I sent back his tube with the envelope containing $3,000 instead of the few hundred he was withdrawing. Worst part was I didn't realize this until about 15 minutes and 10 or so transactions later. I immediately called my manager and just said I fricked up big time. I couldn't even remember which account it was on, so I had no idea who to call or who he was. He could have kept that money and we would have never known. Luckily he was a good Samaritan and came back into the branch and asked for the manager, saying I believe there was a mistake. I was given way too much money but I noticed it wasn't taken out of my account. I don't want your teller fired over this. Issue was resolved in under an hour and I'm forever thankful that guy was a good person and came back to return the money. I read a manifest wrong and pumped the wrong chemical down an oil well and literally ruined a brand new well worth about $4 million. They had to abandon it. Well then. It was a stressful event for me. However, there are people out there whose fricks-ups have killed people, so small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. On the day I was moving to Jersey from VA, I had a date in Virginia. I was planning driving straight to NJ after the date. I ate something bad during dinner and my stomach started acting up. But the date was going well and didn't want to cut it short and thought I could hold it until the date was over. Right after the ended, I got in my car and drove to nearest restaurant to use the bathroom. But nature prevailed and couldn't hold it. I literally shit my pants. It was so bad, I couldn't even get out of my car. So I drove with shit in my pants from VA to NJ. I was worried that I might get pulled over. I got to my apt building at 3 a.m. in the morning. Walked up 3 flights of stairs to make less noise. Got rid of my clothes and took a shower. Damage: I had to buy tools and throw away the driver's side car seat. Cost me $2,000. I had it detailed 4 times in 2 months and finally decided to get rid of the car to get rid of the trauma. P.S. I married her. She does not know the story. Nobody close to me knows. I will take this to my grave. For me, not a lot of fricked up moments yet, but me and my brother sprinted on a pedestrian crossing and got hit by a car about 7 years ago. I realized that I had fricked up when I noticed I was flying through the air. Okay, go. Crash. Uck, where am I? Oh, yeah, I fricked up. Splat. My ex left her panties at my house a few months before I started dating my current girlfriend, and when I found them I thought they were my currents. Needless to say, when I handed her the panties like, "Hey, you left these?" with a smile on my face and she told me they weren't hers, my heart dropped like an anvil. She was definitely pissed off for a few days, but we're fine now. In my 20s, while working at Home Depot, I walked by an aisle full of pallets of doors. As soon as I casually walked by, all of the doors came crashing down, pallets and all. No one knows how it happened, but I'm pretty sure I was the one that put the pallets there a few days prior. Damages were in the thousands. Luckily no one was hurt, but I still think about all of the booby traps I left in that place. Our very old blender started smoking when I was using it, so I frantically unplugged it at the wall and started taking it apart. It was when I heard the whirring and felt the blade go through my fingertip that I realized that in my panic I had instead unplugged the toaster from the socket next to it. Doctor here. The first surgery I scrubbed into in my surgery clerkship in medical school, I accidentally stabbed the patient's liver with a tool called a trocar. Just for some background, in laparoscopic surgery, typically 3 small incisions are made and surgical tools and a camera, laparoscope, are inserted in order to perform the surgery. After making the initial incision, a trocar is placed into the incision to widen the incision and to facilitate the passage of tools. Basically, I misjudged how much force I would need to push the trocar through and very slightly nicked the patient's liver. I immediately began to sweat and fog up my eye protection, thinking I killed the patient. Lol. Luckily, the injury was very minor and I didn't hit any major blood vessels. The surgeon cauterized the area that I hit to stop some minor bleeding, but it was fine. After we saw the patient a few weeks after taking out her gallbladder, she was perfectly fine and recovering well. When I was in 7th grade, my parents woke me up from bed and took me to the guest room where they proceeded to show me what history on the computer was. I was working a facilities job in my early 20s and was a heavy smoker at the time. I worked for a very wealthy company and had a no smoking rule, so every time I needed a cigarette I had to hide behind the building to smoke. Due to a recent change in furniture, we were left with lots of cardboard and plastic wrap, so the dude ordered a roll-away dumpster to the site. This roll-away dumpster happened to be put around the corner of where I smoked. One night I was smoking and got a call to go do a fix on a machine, so I put my cigarette out before finishing it with the intent to come back later. The cigarette broke in half while I was doing so, and in frustration I tossed it into the dumpster. I do the fix on the machine and go back to the shop office to sit down. 5 minutes go by and one of the other facilities guys comes running in and tells me there is a fire. I run to a fire extinguisher and run outside to see there is a huge fire in the dumpster, so me and 3 other people jump in the dumpster to attempt to put it out. After 2 long minutes I look down and see flames coming from underneath the cardboard I am standing on and decided to call it time to dial 911. The flames erupted 9 to 10 feet out of the dumpster when the fire department arrived and it took them nearly half an hour to put it out. We were all examined afterwards and the fire department recommended we all go to the hospital immediately due to smoke inhalation. My cigarette sent 3 people to the hospital and a security camera above the dumpster saw the whole thing. I was fired and banned from the place I worked. In the end I was very fortunate nothing was damaged and nobody was seriously injured. Definitely was an I fricked up moment. Remembered the next morning I left the sink on at a property I was working at. OFC the drain plug was in. Edit, there was no overflow. Kitchen sinks do not always have an overflow. I have been a scuba diver for 22 years and have over 3,000 dives under my belt. I have seen only a couple major dive accidents, one was a heart attack, the guy lived and is doing okay now, the other happened to me and my 2 buddies. I was in the Komodo Islands and it was a drift dive, a dive where the current is so strong you make yourself neutrally buoyant and go with the current and relax. We were diving nitrox, a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen with a higher concentration of oxygen than regular air. I had a mixture that was 36% oxygen and my buddies were within 5% of my oxygen content. This is important because under pressure oxygen becomes toxic. For recreational divers there is a depth limit of 40 meters 130 feet, this is to make sure nobody get oxygen toxicity which normally would set in around 300 plus feet or 90 plus meters. However with a higher oxygen content the safe level becomes shallower. We had a 4th buddy that was a part of our guides group. She was a lady that spoke little English and was very aloof. Our tour guide goes into the water and we follow him. Well, almost all of us. The lady decided she wanted to go her own way. The guide chases after her. The current is so strong we have to climb horizontally across the reef using reef hooks and it was harder than climbing up a mountain. As we are doing this my buddy's clip breaks. My other buddy and I unhook our clips and go after our friend. As we drift we notice another group from our boat so we join them. The dive is going smoothly until I noticed my buddy is trying to take a picture of something and is facing down staring at the ground. I go check on him and realize that he has nitrogen narcosis. Basically it makes you feel intoxicated and causes disorientation and other effects. He was severely disoriented. I grab onto him as the tour guide comes over to help. Out of nowhere the ocean floor starts dropping out from underneath of us. I start pulling us towards the rest of the group we had joined. I then noticed that all of our bubbles are going down. I thought it was one of the most amazing and beautiful things I have ever seen. Until a split second later I realized we were caught in a down current. As the ocean floor descends and there is a current the water will follow gravity being pulled deeper causing the water to have a current that drags you deeper. I quickly check my depth and realize I am at 130 feet and sinking quickly. I grab my 2 buddies by the tank valve and kick as hard and fast as I could. I end up getting us all up to the surface. After a few minutes I notice that we are alone. I blow my whistle and hear a response so I swim towards it towing my 2 buddies. Eventually I reunite with the group. However because we all got caught in the down current and the water was moving so fast we ended up more than a mile from the island where we had been diving. We were still drifting away. We throw up our marker buoys and start making plans to go to one of the other islands we were drifting past depending on how long we would be drifting for. I told the group to wave the buoys in distress but to conserve our air for emergencies and to keep our lights off until nighttime if it came to that. Luckily another boat saw us in distress and rescued us. I put us all on CD compression illness watch and we are done diving for at least 24 hours to monitor our symptoms and make sure we don't have a fun stay in a hyperbaric chamber. We were all okay and nobody had any lasting physical symptoms. A couple of people had PTSD which is understandable given how close we came to dying that day. I was in high school and after a football game had some friends come over for a fire. We couldn't get the wood lit so someone had the bright idea of getting out the gasoline. As I pour some gas onto the barely lit fire, the fire travels up the stream of gas into the gas can. I go into a full-blown panic as I hold this now flamethrower that may or may not explode in my hand. So I had the genius idea of tossing the gas can into my pool that was nearby. Little did I know that gas floats on water, so now my pool looks like the gates of hell and next thing I know the liner is burnt to a crisp and water goes everywhere. My friends look at me amazed that I caught water on fire. Everyone ended up leaving and I went and got laid one last time before my mom murdered me. 15 years ago I had one of the file servers crash in the middle of a data migration. Double drive failure at once plus the backup I had was only stuff that changed in the last 7 days. Luckily only about 20% of the personal files were on that device. Unluckily, half the executives were on that device. So politically it was bad. I went to my boss right away with the quote to have the disk cluster rebuilt. Sent the discs out that day. Restored as much as I could. Went home that night and told the wife that I'd probably be canned once it's all fixed. $15,000 in expenses plus 36 hours of downtime for about 13% of the data. I ended up getting called into the CEO's office a week after everything was fixed. He wanted to know my side of the story directly. I told him that at the end of the day I'm in charge of this stuff, so it is on me. That we have an extremely tight budget which didn't allow for a lot of safety mechanisms. And that the window to move data like this is limited. So I did the best I could with what I had and a double failure occurred. Didn't get fired. Didn't get much of a budget bump. But did get a good raise 6 months later. However, I think it took a long time to gain trust back with the rest of the execs. I went to a job interview after working a 12-hour shift, and when asked what's my biggest weakness or flaw, I said without thinking I'm a pervert. The woman interviewing me just paused and asked me another question and then ended the interview. I didn't get the job. When was a stupid teenager, I took double the shrooms because they were not kicking in fast enough. We were in a park and my friend had a whole ounce on her. Unknown to us, the park closed at 10, right when it kicked in big time. A couple police cars came around to make sure everyone was out of the park, and we were sitting in the car. They pulled up behind us with the lights on and I had a total meltdown. I was sweating buckets, from the top of my head to the bottoms of my feet. My friend, while tripping out of her mind, calmly explained that I was having a panic attack and needed to be left alone. They believed her and let us go. I called my buddy to pick me up and take me home. Found out I had locked myself out of the house, and my mom was out of town. I couldn't stay at my buddy's place, so he drove me a couple cities over to another friend's place, but when we got there was no furniture inside because they had apparently moved the week before. My phone ended up dying, so I ended up showing up at my other friend's doorstep at 1 a.m. Her Catholic parents were not too happy to see me. Pretty much anything I did while I was still an active alcoholic. But what stands out the most is when I got too drunk to take my kid trick-or-treating. I'll never forget that. I got sober a couple of weeks later and have been since. 8 years, and every time I think about it still makes my stomach hurt. I know people have much worse stories about what they did to their children drunk, but this just showed me how I couldn't even meet the smallest commitment to make my daughter happy. Many moons ago, husband was making dinner and came into the living room while the oven was preheating. As we watched TV, an explosion rocked the kitchen. The casserole dish had exploded, sending deadly shards everywhere. It was on the burner that he mistakenly turned on instead of the oven. This is a long one. I tried moving to Seattle from Buffalo with only $1,000 saved up, yes I know, thinking I had a job lined up. Turns out they'd only interviewed me to get information, and I scrambled to get employment as I stayed in a hostel. The temp agency got me work, but 3 weeks later the call center no longer wanted me there, and I got a phone call, in the room I was staying in, that I wasn't being kept. After a lot of thought, I realized no matter what that I would be completely homeless. I took the last $300 or so I had left and bought a bus ticket back to Buffalo, salvaging the stuff I could. To me, it was better to be homeless in a city I knew than a city where I knew nobody. I ran out of money completely in Wisconsin, I lost my wallet in Chicago, and by the time the bus reached Buffalo it had snowed a bunch, so it made it difficult to drag my stuff around. 2.5 years later, here I am, back at work in Seattle. I have a roof over my head, reliable transportation, 2 jobs and large number of new friends. I've been here for nearly a year now after managing to get back onto my feet with my parents' help after the disaster in 2019, and I truly have never been happier. Your frickups and failures are not the end of the world, even though, as I stared out the bus window in November 2019, I felt it was for me. One day, I woke up, wrote to my friend, and we played the entire way out in one sitting. We had a break for lunch, and I ate some sandwiches with the funky smelling blue cheese we had in the back of the drawer in the fridge. It tasted just fine, so I didn't think much of it. Later on, I ate the rest of the cheese as a snack while we played. Oh, how wrong I was. About an hour after we finished, my coworker came to pick me up for work. We were cleaning makeshift headquarters near a factory that was being built, and we were there alone because all the workers had left for the day already. While mopping the toilets, I thought, hey, let's sit down and let's have a shit, it's kinda pushing me. So, I entered the stall with my bucket and mop, and started shitting. First, everything was nice and solid. When I finished, I wiped, and stood up to put on my pants. I felt my stomach rumble, and I thought that it's not over, so I pulled my pants back down and pushed. A violent splash of diarrhea came out. Like, explosive diarrhea. And I was just pissing out of my ass for 10 straight minutes. Worst yet, my coworker was at the opposite side of the headquarters, cleaning the other part of the building, so she couldn't hear me. I pissed so much water out of my ass that I felt my head getting dizzy. And I had no water bottle at hand. And I haven't drunk much water that day, so after 10 minutes of constant brown water stream coming out of my ass, I was pretty freaking dehydrated. But the worst part was yet to come. The smell was starting to build up. The window was too far away, just outside the stall, and it was closed. I felt that familiar need to burp again, and I gagged a little. And I thought, oh no. I had just enough time to reach for the bucket with water from my mop. And I started throwing up. You know that freaking awful feeling when you throw up and shit yourself at the same time? Now imagine you are going through that. For 5 minutes straight. I had to stop vomiting so that I could pour the bucket into the toilet. I sat back down, and kept vomiting and shitting. I never believed that so much liquid could fit into a single human being, but there I was. Finally, my co-worker came to my part of the headquarters to check on me. She opened my bathroom stall, and there I was, pants pulled down, squeezing a fricking bucket between my arms and things, violently shitting and vomiting. She opened up the window, picked up her phone, and called my mom. We were working for my mom's cleaning company. At that point, I was crying, because I wanted it all to stop. My mom asked, "How are you feeling?" All I could say was, I shouldn't have eaten that fricking blue cheese. Before I turned my head back into the bucket to vomit some more. My co-worker ran to get me a bottle of water and 2 activated charcoal pills. I chugged it in one go. A few moments later, it was all over. I stopped shitting and vomiting. My head was spinning like crazy. I couldn't even sit straight, so I had to lean against the bathroom stall. My mom came to the scene. At that point, I was pretty weak, I was dehydrated, but I was alive. When I wiped and flushed, I tried to stand up. And my feet were so weak from how much I tensed up my muscles that the moment I stood up, I fell back down on the toilet, nearly passing out. I leaned against the stall, and my mom literally had to pull up my pants, because I just couldn't do it on my own. They helped me walk to the car, and by the time I was home, I had just enough strength to wash myself and go to sleep. And that all because I had fricked up by listening to my stomach more than going by the common sense to not eat funky smelling cheese. Edit, since this got popular, and a few people got their laughs, I'm adding a little bonus story. Yep, it's about shitting and puking again. But it's not as violent. Edit 2, spelling, and I added some details I forgot to include. We went to visit my grandma in the south of Slovakia. Beautiful nature there, lots of places to hike too. My mom took me, her friend, and her friend's son with us. On the first night, I started feeling somewhat sick, and I had a weird fricking fever dream where I was riding a fricking camel through a desert. At one point it got so weird that I started feeling dizzy. Suddenly, I woke up, went to the toilet, and threw up. I went back to bed, thinking nothing of it. But I threw up 2 more times during the night. Each time I went, I had to step over my friend, who was sleeping on a mattress on the ground. Never mind, I fell asleep, and woke up in the morning. Terrible stomach pain, literally made me curl up in fetal pose. My mom gave me some meds, and everyone was preparing to leave for a hike. I stayed in bed, obviously. As everyone started preparing, I had that feeling of wanting to fart. I trusted that fart, but it betrayed me. A small blast of diarrhea straight into my boxers. Oh no! I fricked up. I clenched my butt as hard as I could, but I didn't want anyone to find out I shat myself, so I just stayed in bed and pretended that I needed some sleep. In that same position that I woke up in. I had to wait for 20 minutes until the house was empty. 20 nightmarish minutes of clenching my asshole. I was lying in bed, ass dripping with liquid shit, hoping it didn't soak through and stain the bed. I wasn't even moving, that's how scared I was. When the coast was clear, I ran to the shower. I washed the shit out of my boxers, washed myself, and let the boxers dry out outside.